The moving truck pulled away with a puff of dust, leaving Clara Bishop and her father standing in front of the old farmhouse. The sun hung low over the hills, bleeding orange light across the trees. Summer in rural Virginia wasn't what Clara had imagined. It was quieter, slower, and strangely heavy, as if the air itself held its breath. "Looks like we've got a lot of unpacking to do," her father said, forcing a smile. Clara didn't answer. She was still staring at the dense tree line behind the house, where the woods seemed darker than they should have been even at this hour. The locals called this place Black Hollow, a forgotten patch of land surrounded by thick forest and even thicker silence. Clara's dad had bought the house cheap, claiming it was a perfect escape from the noise of the city. But Clara didn't ask to escape. She just wanted to go back to her old life, where her mother was still alive. That night, Clara sat on the back porch with a glass of water, watching the sky dim. Crickets buzzed, owls hooted, and the air grew cool. Around 8:30, she noticed something strange for Bohem. It didn't drift in slowly, the way she expected. It rolled in like a wave, sudden and low, curling at the edges of the grass and sliding between tree trunks like fingers. Then she heard it. Her name? Clara! She froze. The voice was soft, barely a whisper, but it came from the woods. It wasn't her father. He was still inside, talking on the phone, and it definitely wasn't an animal. It sounded familiar. Clara. Her blood went cold. It was her mother's voice. Gentle, sad. She stood up, stepping down from the porch, the grass damp beneath her feet. The fog was thicker now, clinging to her legs. The voice called again. Closer this time. "Come here." Clara's heart pounded. She took one step forward, then another, drawn to the voice like a moth to flame. But just as she reached the edge of the trees, her father shouted from the house, "Clara, you out there?" She blinked, and the fog vanished, like it had never been there at all. She turned, wide-eyed, and walked back up the steps without a word. Inside, her dad looked at her strangely. "You okay? You look pale." Clara nodded slowly. "I thought I saw fog," she whispered. Her dad frowned. "There hasn't been fog here in weeks. This area is bone dry." Clara didn't respond. She just stared out of the window toward the trees and thought, "I didn't imagine that." I know I heard her. The next morning, the woods looked perfectly normal. No fog, no voices, no strange chill in the air. But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed. That night's whisper still rang in her ears, her mother's voice, soft and calling her deeper. A voice she hadn't heard since the funeral. After breakfast, Clara grabbed her notebook and camera, claiming she wanted to explore the land. Her dad, busy unpacking, barely looked up. "Just don't go too far," he muttered. Clara headed toward the forest. The trees were tall and old, their branches tangled like arms locked in a secret. Ferns brushed her ankles, birds chirped from the canopy, but there was no wind, no sound of leaves rustling, as if the forest held its breath again. Just like yesterday, 15 minutes in, she saw it, an old iron gate, rusted and leaning sideways, hidden behind thick vines and moss. No path led to it, no sign marked it. It stood alone, like a forgotten secret. Clara stepped closer, pushing the vines aside. Beyond the gate stretched rows of gravestones, some cracked, others swallowed by roots. The cemetery was massive but completely silent. No birds, no insects, only stillness. There was no lock on the gate, no latch, no handle. She ran her fingers over the metal. Cold, solid, she pushed gently, and the gate creaked open with an aching groan. The sound echoed too far, louder than it should have in such a small space. As she stepped inside, the air changed. Cooler, thicker. Clara walked slowly past the first row of gravestones. Most were unreadable, worn smooth by time. But one near the center made her stop. It was small, child-sized, with nothing written on it except a single word, carved deep into the stone. Returned. Not a name, not a date. Just that. Clara frowned. "Returned to what?" she whispered aloud. A gust of cold wind brushed past her neck. She turned sharply. No one was there. She reached for her phone to take a photo, but the screen wouldn't turn on. Dead, even though it had 82% battery that morning. Her fingers trembled slightly. Suddenly, a branch snapped behind her. She spun around. Nothing. But the wind picked up again, curling through the trees. And with it came something else. Something familiar. That same voice. "Clara!" It was faint, distant, but undeniably there. She backed toward the gate, heart thudding, and pushed it open once more. As she crossed through it, the air warmed instantly. The sun returned. The birds chirped again, like nothing had happened. Clara turned to look back. The gate was gone. Clara didn't sleep that night. She kept replaying what happened in the woods, the gate, the cold air, the gravestone marked returned, and most of all, the voice. Her mother's voice. By 3 a.m., she gave up on sleep and sat at her desk with a flashlight, scribbling into her notebook. She didn't know what she was writing, just thoughts, feelings, memories. It felt like something inside her wanted to speak, but didn't have the words yet. The next morning, as dawn crept through the windows, Clara opened her bedroom door to grab the mail just in case. Even though they had only moved in a few days ago, she figured it would distract her. But sitting on the hallway floor was an envelope. No stamp, no address, just her name written on the front in beautiful, looping cursive. Clara Bishop. She froze, picked it up slowly. The paper smelled faintly of dried flowers and something else ash. Inside was a single folded page. The same handwriting continued. You've opened the gate. That means you've heard them. I did too. Once, long ago. They don't forget the ones who hear. Oh, Clara stared at the initials. Oh. Her mother's name was Lillian May Bishop. Was this some kind of sick joke? She rushed to her father's room. He was half asleep, blinking. What is it? He mumbled. Did you write this? She asked, holding up the note. He shook his head slowly. Where did you get that? By my door. This morning. He looked genuinely confused. We don't even know anyone here. Clara didn't say anything else. She just walked back to her room, locked the door, and sat down hard on her bed. She looked at the letter again, noticed something she missed before, a small smudge near the bottom fingerprints, but not fresh ones. They were brown, dry, like old blood. She placed the note in her notebook, stuffed both into her backpack, and decided to return to the woods. If someone knew what was going on, she had to find them, or at least find the truth. She had barely stepped past the tree line when she felt it again. That eerie pressure in the air, the quiet, the sudden stillness. Her skin tingled. And there, 20 feet ahead, was the gate again, exactly where she first found it, as if it had never vanished at all. The gate stood exactly where it had been before rusted, crooked, half swallowed by vines. Clara reached out and touched the iron again. Cold, almost wet with dew. Though the forest floor was dry, she pushed it open, expecting the groaning sound. This time, it was silent. She stepped through. The gravestones were just as she left them, tilted, cracked, some nearly hidden by moss and weeds. But something was different. A boy stood in the distance. At the far edge of the cemetery, Clara blinked. He hadn't been there a second ago. He looked about her age, maybe 17, wore jeans, a plain gray hoodie, and stood with his back to her, staring down at a grave. Hello, she called. The boy didn't move. Clara stepped closer. The leaves crunched under her boots. Hey, are you okay? She tried again. Finally, the boy turned to face her. His eyes were strange, grayish white, almost cloudy, like they didn't belong to someone alive. You shouldn't be here, he said softly. Clara stopped. Do you live nearby? No one lives here, he replied. His voice was calm but hollow. They told you to come, didn't they? Clara's stomach turned. Who's they? The boy glanced around nervously. The ones under the ground, the ones that whisper when the sun goes down. They like new voices. Clara's heart pounded. You're trying to scare me. He stepped closer, his expression serious. I'm trying to warn you. A gust of cold air rushed through the cemetery, rattling the trees. The boy's hoodie fluttered. He looked toward the trees behind her. When the bell tolls, he whispered, don't follow the voice. That's how they get in. Clara narrowed her eyes. What bell? There's no bell tower here. There used to be, he said. Before the fire, before they were trapped here. She blinked. What do you mean trapped? But he didn't answer. He just pointed behind her. Clara turned, but no one was there. When she turned back around, the boy was gone. Clara ran home from the cemetery without stopping, her breath tight in her chest and her hands numb from the cold that clung to her skin. The boy, whoever or whatever he was, had disappeared like smoke. No footprints, no sound. One moment he was there, and the next, the space he had filled that was just empty. That night, Clara couldn't focus on dinner. Her father noticed. You okay? He asked, scooping potatoes onto his plate. She nodded too quickly. Yeah, just tired. He didn't push. He rarely did these days. Since Mom died, there was a lot left unsaid between them. After dinner, Clara sat on her bed and stared out the windows. The woods were dark and still. Moonlight spilled across the yard like silver mist. For a long time, nothing happened. Then, just after midnight, she saw it. A figure stood at this tree line, not moving, just standing, watching. It was tall, human-shaped, but something was off. Its arms were too long, and its head hung low like it had no neck. Its outline shimmered, like heat rising from asphalt. Though the air was cold, Clara held her breath. It didn't move. Suddenly, her bedroom light flickered. The bulb buzzed and dimmed. The digital clock beside her bed blinked and reset. 12:00, 12:00. She turned back to the window. The figure was gone. But in its place, deep within the trees, a soft bell rang. One long, low toll, then silence. Clara felt every hair on her body stand up. Then came the whisper. Soft, familiar. Clara, come back. She jumped to her feet and stumbled backward from the window. No, she whispered aloud. No, no, no. The whisper came again. Closer. We're still waiting. Suddenly, her bedroom door creaked open behind her. Click, I found, her dad said, peeking in. Were you talking to someone? She shook her head, heart racing. No, just bad dream. He looked around, confused. You okay? She nodded again, but her voice was thin. Yeah, just tired. He gave her a strange look, then shut the door. She turned back to the window one last time. Now the woods were empty again. The moon was still, the wind had died, but something deep inside her knew. She was being watched, and whatever had found her was getting closer. The next morning, Clara biked into town. She couldn't stop thinking about the boy. The whisper, the bell, and the figure watching her from the woods. There were too many questions and too many terrifying answers hiding just out of reach. So she went to the only place that still kept records older than anyone alive, the Black Hollow Historical Library. The building stood at the edge of Main Street, an old red brick structure with ivy creeping up its sides. Inside it, it smelled like dust, time, and forgotten secrets. Clara approached the front desk. A thin woman with gray hair and half-moon glasses looked up from a ledger. Can I help you? Clara hesitated. I'm researching the cemetery. The one behind my house. I think it's called Black Hollow Cemetery. The woman finished, her face instantly stiff. That place shouldn't exist anymore. Clara blinked. Why? The woman didn't answer. She simply stood up and walked toward the back, beckoning Clara to follow. She opened a locked cabinet and removed a dusty black box labeled Black Hollow Records, 1870-1905. She set it down, then whispered, whatever you're looking for, don't dig too deep. Clara opened the box. Inside were yellowed papers, brittle news clippings, and faded photos. Most were water damaged, but one headline caught her eye. Mass funeral at Black Hollow 38 buried after church fire. Another page read, witnesses say church bell rang after fire was out. No one pulled it. Survivors claimed to hear voices calling from below the graves. Then, something even stranger, a handwritten funeral guest list. And at the very bottom, Lillian May Bishop, choir singer. Clara stared at the name. Her mother's name, but that wasn't possible. Her mom wasn't from here. She was born nearly a century later. Unless, she flipped the page and gasped. There, paper clipped to the corner, was an old photograph. It showed a group of young women in choir robes, standing in front of a wooden church. One of them looked exactly like her mother. Same face, same eyes, same sad, knowing smile. Clara's heart pounded. She snapped a photo of the image with her phone, stuffed the original page into her jacket, and backed away from the box. On her way out, the woman at the desk spoke without looking up. Whatever lives in that cemetery, it's not done with your family. Clara froze. How do you know who I am? But the woman just smiled faintly. I told you, that place shouldn't exist. Clara couldn't sleep. Again, the photograph haunted her. Her mother's face staring back from a time nearly a century before she was born. It couldn't be real. None of this could be real. And yet, it was. She had proof. But the most disturbing part wasn't the photo. It was what the librarian said before Clara left. That place isn't done with your family. Those words echoed in her mind over and over until they became something else. A pull, a call. By midnight, Clara was back at the edge of the woods. Her flashlight beam flickered as she stepped carefully through the underbrush. The air was thick again, cold, heavy, expectant. The cemetery was waiting for her. She passed the gate without hesitation and moved deeper this time. Past the child's grave, past the tree with the split trunk, toward the far end, where newer graves, if they could be called that, began to appear. One grave caught her eye. Unlike the others, this one wasn't cracked or worn. Its stone was smooth, recently cleaned, as if someone had visited it. The number 17 was etched on the front. No name, no dates, just that single number. Clara's breath fogged in front of her. This was it, the grave the voice told her about. If you want the truth, open grave 17. Her hands trembled as she dug, fingers clawing at the dirt. The ground was soft, almost loose as though someone had opened it recently. After only a few minutes of digging, she hit something solid. Not a coffin, a box, stone, sealed tight. No markings. She brushed away the dirt and pried it open with a rusted crowbar she'd found earlier near the tool shed. Inside, not bones, not ashes, not even air. Inside was a mirror, old, fogged, and framed in black and silver, but clean enough for her to see her reflection. Only, it wasn't just her reflection staring back. Behind her, in the glass, stood her mother, Lillian, alive, crying. Clara gasped and turned around. Nothing. She looked back into the mirror. Her mother was still there, mouthing something silently. Clara leaned in, whispering, "What are you saying?" The reflection flickered. Her mother's eyes turned black. Her mouth opened wider, wider, until it stretched unnaturally far. Then Clara heard it not from the mirror, but from the earth below. She belongs to us now. The mirror shattered. Clara stumbled back, glass cutting her palm. She clutched her hand, heart racing. From the trees came a distant toll of a bell. One long ring, then silence. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply stood there, staring at the empty box, whispering to herself, "What have I just opened?" Clara didn't go home that night. She wandered the woods until dawn, flashlight dying in her hand, blood crusting on her palm from the mirror's shards. Her thoughts were louder than the birdsong, louder than the wind that finally stirred the trees at sunrise. She knew now something wanted her. But what scared her more was that something inside her felt it already had her. She returned home only to wash the blood from her hand and stuff her backpack with water, gloves, and an old map of the area she found in her dad's garage. She needed answers, not from people, not from books, but from the source. According to the map, there was a path branching off the forest trail, one that led to a ruined structure simply labeled Old Church Burned 1902. Clara found the trail just before noon. It was overgrown and half buried, but the deeper she walked, the more she noticed strange signs. Tree bark burned black in perfect circles. Crows sitting silently on branches, not blinking, a soft humming in the air, like a song with no words. At the end of the trail, she found it, the remains of a church, sunken into the earth like a dying heart. Only the stone foundation remained twisted and blackened. The steeple had collapsed, and ash covered everything like gray snow. She stepped inside. The floor creaked, even though most of it was just dirt and scorched wood. At the front, where the altar once stood, something glinted in the rubble. Clara knelt down and brushed away the ash. It was a silver cross, half melted, its center warped into a spiral. Beneath it, a piece of photograph, half burned. She picked it up, heart skipping. It was her mother. Again, but this time, Lillian stood alone, not in a choir, but at the altar. Behind her, shadows loomed vague, black shapes shaped like humans, but hollow-eyed and blurry. On the back of the photo were words written in ink. The bell rings when the door is open. Do not let her sing. Suddenly, the humming around her grew louder. Clara turned, no one there, but the air was moving, circling her like a windless storm. The ashes lifted gently from the floor and spun in a ring around her. Her ears rang with the sound of that bell again, impossibly loud. She covered her ears, and in that moment, she saw her mother's face again, this time burned into the altar wall, like a ghost scorched into the stone. Eyes closed, mouth open, as if mid-song. Clara stumbled backward and fled the ruins, running through the woods with her backpack clutched tight. Something was coming back, and it would start with the bell. Clara didn't speak for the rest of the day. She sat on her bed with the photo from the burned church clutched in her hands, replaying what she'd read. The bell rings when the door is open. Do not let her sing. The bell had rung. The mirror had shown her mother. The ashes had risen, and now the door was open. But what door? And what did singing have to do with it? That night, her father came to check on her. You haven't eaten, he said softly, leaning on the doorframe. She looked up at him, hollow-eyed. Dad, did Mom ever live here? Before she met you. He blinked. What? No. She hated the countryside. Said it made her feel like she was being watched. Clara's stomach twisted. Did she ever talk in her sleep? Maybe. His face darkened. Slowly, he nodded. She used to hum this weird tune really slow, almost like a lullaby. Gave me chills. Why? But Clara didn't answer, because she could hear it now. That same tune, humming, downstairs. She and her father rushed to the living room, where the humming grew louder. There, sitting calmly on the couch, was a woman. Her mother, she looked exactly the same, hair tucked behind her ear, eyes gentle and glassy. Lillian, her father whispered in horror. The woman turned toward them, slowly. I'm home, she said softly. Clara knew better. This wasn't her mother. This was something else. Wearing her face, she backed away. That's not her, she warned. Don't talk to it. But her father was frozen, tears welling. Lillian, how is this possible? The thing smiled. I've always been here. The house flickered. The lights dimmed. The air grew cold. And outside, the bell rang again. Clara grabbed her father's arm. We need to leave. Now. But it was too late. The woman stood. Her eyes turned black. Her mouth opened wide, and from it came a deep, echoing note. A song. It wasn't human. It was low, vibrating, like the sound of the earth moaning. Windows cracked. Bookshelves fell. Clara screamed. Suddenly, all around them, the walls shifted. The house stretched, growing taller, darker, like it wasn't a house anymore, but something else. A vessel. Outside, through the window, Clara saw the trees begin to move. People were walking out of the woods. Only they weren't people. Their faces were wrong, twisted, hollow. The residents of Black Hollow Cemetery. Every grave had opened, and they were coming home. The house groaned like a living thing. Shadows crawled along the walls. The lights blinked and died. The woman who wore her mother's face began to sing a song not made for human ears. It was deep, droning, full of ancient grief and something worse, hunger. Outside, the dead were drawing closer. Their eyes glowed faint white in the dark. No screams, no words, just silence and movement. Clara grabbed her father's hand and pulled him toward the door. "We have to get back to the cemetery." She gasped. That's where it started. He hesitated. "That's where she came from." "No," Clara said, looking into his eyes. "That's where we send her back." They ran into the night, through the woods, tripping over roots and dodging low branches. The fog had returned thick, suffocating, curling around their legs like it wanted to hold them still. Behind them, the bell tolled once more, louder than before, closer. It was no longer a warning. It was a summons. When they reached the cemetery gate, the crowd of dead had already gathered. They stood still motionless, faceless shadows wrapped in the rags of time. In the center, the woman waited, hands folded, face calm. "You brought her back," Clara whispered. But her father shook his head. "No, you were always meant to be here." Clara's blood turned to ice. "What?" He looked at her, eyes wide with grief. "I heard them too. When your mother died, I went to the cemetery. I opened the gate." Clara staggered backward. "I made a deal," he said, voice cracking. "I wanted her back. They said I could have her just for a while, but I had to give them something in return." Clara's breath caught in her throat. "They wanted a soul, one born of the one I loved most, her." Suddenly, everything made sense. The cemetery, the gate, the song, the way it all seemed to wait for her. She wasn't the first, she was the offering. But something inside her had changed. Clara wasn't afraid anymore. She felt something burning in her chest, a light, a voice of her own. She turned to the graves and screamed, "No more." The bell rang one final time. It shattered. The dead froze. The woman who wore her mother's face opened her mouth, but no sound came. Her eyes widened. Her body convulsed. Clara stepped forward and reached into her backpack. From it, she pulled the melted silver cross she'd taken from the church ruins. She held it high. "Return what was never yours." A sudden wind howled through the cemetery, roaring like the earth itself was screaming. The dead were pulled backward, their forms unraveling like smoke. One by one, the graves closed. The fog burned away. The trees stood still. The woman screamed this time, with her mother's voice. It broke Clara's heart. But she didn't stop. She held the cross firm as the woman dissolved into ash and memory. Then, silence. The cemetery was empty again. The grass still, the stones quiet. Her father collapsed beside her, sobbing. "I'm sorry. I didn't know it would go this far." Clara knelt beside him and whispered, "It ends with me." And it did. Epilogue. 1 year later. Clara never told anyone what happened. Her father moved away. She stayed behind. No one ever found the cemetery again. It was as if the forest swallowed it whole. But on certain nights, when the fog is thick and the wind is still, some say they hear a bell toll in the distance. And if you listen closely, you might hear a voice singing just beneath the earth.